Well, good morning. Today is Wednesday, the 9th of December, and it is 6:45 in the morning. And I want to submit the last lecture for you today. Then my plan is to do a review on Friday, the 11th, and I will be available on Monday, the 14th, which is the last day for regular classes. I will be available that day to answer questions, so send me a text, uh, whatever, and I will be available to answer questions for you. However, I cannot answer questions once you start taking the exam. So just keep that in mind because it then wouldn't be fair to those other students who have maybe already taken the exam and didn't have the benefit of the same information. Now, I want to tell you that the exam is going to open on Tuesday, December the 15th at 8 a.m. and it is going to close on Thursday, December the 17th at 11:59 p.m. I also want you to know that you will not be using the lockdown browser, the lockdown monitor browser, because this is an open book final. Um, Merry Christmas. That means that you can use your PowerPoint, your textbook, any notes that you have taken. And when I when I say take notes over information that is not on the PowerPoint, that's for your benefit. So um, please do so. This is a Christmas gift to you, making this an open book final. So this is what it's going to look like. Final opens Tuesday the 15th, closes Thursday the 17th at 11:59. Open book exam. You can use your notes, text, PowerPoint, or whatever. You do not use the lockdown monitor browser. Okay? I hope it makes sense to you. And I will repeat this information and I will put it on Canvas for you also, just so you know. All right, let's get started so that we can finish the lecture up. Now, one suggestion I have for you with the information to follow is you will want to take notes because it's about dyslexia. And there isn't a lot of information in the textbook regarding dyslexia. But I think it's important enough to give you this information because of the major that you're in. The LED special ed majors, some of you will, some of you won't be in a regular ed classroom. You will have students who struggled with letter sound association, reversals, spelling, vocabulary, memory, because dyslexia is neurologically based. And so I want you to have some information, and I don't know if you get that information in other classes. I don't know the curriculum in LED, right, in special ed. Also, I want the SPA majors to have this information because you will be working with children on phonemic awareness, on letter sound association, on spelling, reading, writing. It's all language based. And so you will potentially have some of our kiddos in therapy as well. The schools, traditionally, when I was in the public school, didn't address dyslexia. The term was out there in space, and you would hear people talk about it, but it was not evaluated if the child had dyslexia. I don't even remember students going to an outside agency and being tested for dyslexia. It just really wasn't happening. Well, the times have changed, and the school systems, the traditional, what we call brick and mortar schools, are now having to deal with it. Um, Historically, I don't think they had staff who could teach reading to the kids who had dyslexia. I don't think they had the resources. I don't think it was in their budget. And so these kids went into the resource room. It was an LD problem, and to be remediated by the LD resource teacher. Well, it isn't really a learning disability as such. It is in a classification all its own, and the schools are now recognizing that. So that's the impetus behind why I want to talk about this a little bit more. I had a student who, she's still in our program, she's a spa major, and she was in the honors college, and she had me supervise an honors project for her. And that project was to research dyslexia and then to interview a child diagnosed with dyslexia, the parent of the child diagnosed with dyslexia, and she also interviewed one of our speech pathology supervisors who not only supervises clinic, but she also supervises diagnostics when new clients come in for testing. And we have a test instrument called the TILS, and I do believe I've talked about it before, but it's not, I would not say it's specifically a test for dyslexia. I would say that it can tease out, so to speak, different disorders, and it can tell you if they're falling within that category, so that we have a better understanding as to how to deal with them in remediation. The schools now are getting on board, hiring faculty to teach to these children, and the um, program of choice, I guess, would be Orton Gillingham, ORTON hyphen GILLINGHAM. And it is the strategy that is being used. There used to be an SLP here in Muncie who also was tutoring children with Orton Gillingham. And there was one other program, and quite frankly, I can't remember what it was called right now. Tutoring. She had this special training because you have to have, I believe, 25 hours of training to be able to certify to work with kids with dyslexia, diagnose that, and then treat. And there is, and she is no longer in Muncie, but she's in Anderson. And we also have a couple, a husband and wife, who are in an adjoining community who also have students that they're tutoring using the Orton Gillingham program. So it seems to be the program of choice. When I spoke to a parent about this program for her child, she said it has made measurable gains in her son's progress. It didn't remediate him totally, and he still is receiving services. So I've had favorable comments. My colleague here uh, felt that it was a valuable program. You know, you have to look around as a parent and find what works for you. It's probably not cheap. Insurance probably doesn't pay. And the school systems who do not provide that service, but it is a law now. Now, I don't believe the law says they have to use Orton Gillingham, but I do believe that the law says you have to evaluate and treat. So they do have to get on board. So we are going to go into the public schools now in the future, near future, and these kiddos will be given the attention that they deserve and need to be successful. You can be a successful businessman. You can um, do anything, but you have to recognize the fact that this is what the problem is. You have to compensate, and you may have to have somebody who can help you along the way. There are famous individuals who have dyslexia, and they will tell you that. So it's not something that can pull you down and maybe stifle your dreams as a young person, but certainly it has to be taken care of in a proper way for you to move forward. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about dyslexia a little bit, and I encourage you to take some notes because there will be questions on the final about dyslexia. It's considered a specific learning disability, and it is neurologically based. Neurologically based. So something in the wiring isn't working quite right, and so the information doesn't get to the brain and process correctly. It is characterized by difficulties. I'm trying to position my notes here. With characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition. These kids are poor spellers, and they have very poor decoding skills. Now, if you don't know what that means, decoding means, here's a word, cat. If it's a word I don't recognize, it's a word I don't know, how am I going to figure it out? You have to have the letter sound association in order to do that. Well, it doesn't always work that easily because cat can be a hard C or a soft C. And so there are rules that we use and some rules that have to be learned. But how would you even attack decoding that word? You could do cat, cat, cat. Or if you weren't sure if it was a hard C or a soft C, it might sound like at, sat. Well, with that, you could at least try and teach the difference between cat and sat. But if you can't decode, if you don't know what the C or the S, the A, the T, what sound they make or how they work together with adjacent sounds, you don't know where to begin. You have no point of reference. And so that's decoding. These difficulties are typically the result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. That's what that S says, that's what that means. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. And that definition came, it's in quotes, and it came from the International Dyslexia Association. As I said, it is a language-based learning disability. And guess what? It affects the 5 areas of language. We've talked and talked and talked about these 5 areas of language: morphology, syntax, semantics, phonology, and pragmatics. We use all of those areas of language in our academic education. And so dyslexia can impact all of that. Phonological awareness, these kiddos have difficulty identifying speech sounds within words and how the letter set represents the sound and how they all work together, how you tear them apart, that decoding, and how you put them back together. It's not just that B says ba, but it's how you sequence those sounds together. These kids will also have trouble in oral language or in spoken language as they attempt to express themselves. They have trouble expressing themselves. They struggle pronouncing words, and they have difficulty understanding others. So it's receptive and expressive, not just the expressive component of where you're writing, spelling. It's also receptive, the information you understand and the information you give back. So in written language, there are going to be grammatical errors, spelling errors. They're going to struggle writing essays. Dyslexia, according to Emmanuel in his research in 2016, says that dyslexia is the most common learning disability in the United States. The most common learning disability in the United States, according to Emmanuel 2016. 20% of the population is affected by dyslexia and represents 80 to 90% of all those who have a learning disability. That came out of the Yale School of Medicine in 2017. So we have reputable institutions doing this research, and it's pretty current. It equally affects males and females. Now, we know that autism is seen more, or it's more prevalent in males than females. Stuttering is another example of more prevalence in males than females. But we do have equal effects of dyslexia on males and females, but more boys are referred. And that came out of the research from the School of Medicine because of the boys' behaviors. Now, remember when we talked about gender differences and how girls act and how boys act, and boys are a little more aggressive and girls are, a little more calm and that sort of thing. Well, the boys get referred because of the behavior that gets labeled as bad. And when in reality, it's probably more frustration than anything. The cause? It is genetically inherited. So, if you have a parent who's shared with you, and it might be hard for them to do that, I just struggled learning to read in school. It was so hard for me. So I understand what you're going through. Maybe they didn't get diagnosed. They were never evaluated for dyslexia. And here, at least you have that advantage of an assessment and treatment. So it is genetically inherited. And it has neurological differences within the brain. We do know that. It runs in families, as you could imagine. as many as 49% of parents and kids say that kids have the dyslexia too. So therein lies the cause and the statistics. It runs in families and it is genetically based. It is a chronic disability. It doesn't go away, gets better with treatment and early intervention. I don't think I need to beat that dead horse because we know early intervention is vital to so many disabilities and how our kids are getting the success through the treatment that they need. These kids do not want to read aloud. I remember being in school and the teacher saying, "Okay, it's Susie's turn. You read the next chapter and you read the next chapter." They fear it because they can't do it. We all know who the smart kids are in class. We all know who the teacher's going to call on because nobody else can answer the question. And so these kids are afraid of reading out loud. They become very nervous. They feel stupid. It attacks the self-esteem. Remember, in the early years of your education, you were learning to read. You get to third and fourth grade, and the further you go up in elementary school, middle school, high school, you are reading to learn. I think it's a given. I don't think I have to explain the ramifications from that. So in preschool, some of the symptoms that we might see, the children struggle learning the names and letters of the alphabet, mispronunciation of familiar words. Now, we know that some children will say Paschetti or ambulance, or my daughter used to say yogurt. We know that sometimes children will do that, but then there becomes a time, there is a point in which that doesn't happen anymore. Well, some of these kids with dyslexia may continue to do that. In kindergarten through the first grade, they don't like reading. It's not fun. And this is just not the kid who just can't sit still and doesn't want to do it. They struggle. Second grade to high school, reading is slow and awkward. There's that reading fluency. They have poor test time management because it takes them longer to read the test questions, and they struggle with reading. As adults, they also talk about problems with word retrieval. It definitely is underdiagnosed, but hopefully we will change that a bit. We've already talked about Orton Gillingham. It does put a strong emphasis on understanding the how and why behind reading. And once they know consistent rules and patterns, they're better able to decode the words, according to this paragraph that focuses on the treatment approach. It is the primary treatment method for dyslexia, and it is one of the primary methods for teaching reading. That came from the Institute for Multisensory Education in 2019. It is diagnosed a little bit later, third or fourth grade. Students, according to the recent federal data, more than 60% of fourth graders in the United States are not proficient readers. My gosh, did you hear that? 60% of fourth graders. This is where you're reading to learn. No wonder academics are so hard for them. Students who struggle to read are likely to drop out of school. They have low-income jobs, And that just segues right into poverty, which certainly we have enough of. In terms of making accommodations, we want to expose these students to some audiobooks upon occasion. As we talked about blindness in hearing, it's fatiguing to really be on guard. You know, you've got this hypervigilance and you're on guard and you have to be so alert and pay such close attention, and it's fatiguing. And so is learning to read, especially with that diagnosis. Okay, let's see. She has some information. The parent of this little guy, his name is Daniel, and he was about 2 when the parents began to notice that he had literacy difficulties. Now, I don't know how that came about, but his vocabulary wasn't very large. He struggled with verbal expression. He had poor speech intelligibility, and he also had some articulation errors. So they had him in the public school in a local community school, and they just weren't able to deal with him and his issues. And the teachers just said, he's just got to work harder. Well, as the parent, they knew he was working really, really hard, and it just simply was not coming. So they took him out of the public school and put him in Inspire Academy, which is here in Muncie. It's a charter school. And they put him in that school, and he got more one-on-one attention, and he began to thrive. But as what happens to so many of these charter schools, they can't pay the teachers quite as well, and so there was a high turnover rate, and then more and more students who were going to the Inspire Academy, I think, had some more behavior problems, and so the whole complexity of this disorder, when one parent says, oh yes, it's really good for my child, and then more and more and more children start to go, but then the overall complexion of the school began to change. So he is one that is going to this husband and wife team for tutoring and for training. I want to see if she has some. She does not have any of the comments from Daniel because she interviewed him too. So, some key takeaways. It's a language-based learning disability. It's the most common cause of word recognition, reading, fluency, spelling, and writing difficulties. And these difficulties are derived from, remember, poor phonological awareness. It's neurologically based, and it is inherited. And the treatment of choice is Orton-Gillingham. Okay? You can do some more research on your own, and maybe you're interested in the training. I was interested in the training. I think it would be interesting. Who knows? Maybe I'll do it. Okay, now let's continue on and finish up chapter 9. We've already talked about the phonological disorders. I'm on page 167 of the PowerPoint. And I don't think that I need to go into that anymore since we just reviewed the dyslexia. So as we talk about intelligibility, because some of our kiddos in school, the intelligibility is tough. You have no idea what they're saying. And so this little child comes up and starts talking to you and you go, oh yeah, really? And because you have no idea what they're saying. And the child may say, no, no. And you still don't understand because of the intelligibility. So articulation disorders can be overwhelming to a speech pathologist, that's for sure. And articulation disorders as a classroom teacher can impact spelling for sure. And so you may see it as a teacher from that perspective, and the SLP is going to see it from another perspective. So you can have substitutions, distortions of sounds, and you can also have omissions of sounds. We've already talked about voice disorders a little bit. You may have the child in your classroom whose voice is hoarse, raspy, laryngitis-like, because he is abusing his voice. And certainly that type of scenario should be referred to a doctor, and probably to an ENT, ear, nose, and throat specialist. That's really where that needs to land. We also have voice disorders with degenerative diseases, Parkinson's, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. You may know it as Lou Gehrig's disease. The voice becomes, as the day goes on, the voice becomes weaker, weaker, and weaker, and there's fatigue. Now, with degenerative diseases, you also have breathing issues. You also have muscle tone deterioration. And so the person isn't able, as we talked about with respiration, remember those 4 processes? Respiration, you've got to be able to take in enough air in order to generate the expressive language. And some of these diseases compromise that for sure. And so we know that teachers, preachers, anybody who is on a lecture circuit is probably going to deal with a voice disorder at some point in time. Singers, Keith Urban did. Adele. There was another famous singer who also, Celine Dion, I think, had some vocal rest. And so their concern is, I can't sing like I used to, so after maybe some surgery to remove that vocal nodule, it's like a callus that you get on your foot or on your finger from a pencil. It's on the vocal cords, and they will surgically go in and take that off. So then singing is your bread and butter. And so you wonder, am I going to sound the same? Well, I think that these few that I have mentioned have successfully come back. There was also, Luke Combs is a country singer who has risen to fame, and he's been out there for a few years now. I listened to some of his music on the radio the other day, early music, and his voice was very clear and melodic. Now he's got a raspy tone to his voice. He's been hitting it hard, and he hasn't had enough vocal rest, probably. So we see those voice disorders, and typically they will need medical attention, and they would go to the doctor. Organic voice disorders, remember there's some pathology, could be cancer, contact ulcers on the vocal cords, gastroesophageal reflux disease. It comes back up. You have reflux. Well, what you're bringing up is stomach acid, and that can damage the vocal cords too if it goes unattended. Again, those are more neurologically based, and they need to go to the doctor. Fluency disorders, we've talked about that a little bit. We know, and I just mentioned, stuttering is more common in boys than girls. And there's a normal developmental pattern with normal disfluencies that children go through. Think about all that explosion of language, and they have so much to say, and they've got to get it out. And who knows? Oh, I don't know what I want to say. Normal, easy repetitions. Developmental stuttering begins, and this is on the PowerPoint. I'm now on PowerPoint information, by the way. Developmental stuttering begins in childhood between the ages of 2 and 6. Certainly, I want it to be gone by 6. Don't want it to rear its ugly head. I certainly do not want to see struggle here. I don't want to see secondary characteristics where they're nodding their head and blinking their eyes to try and get through a moment of stuttering. Don't want to see that. Again, if you're a teacher in the classroom and there is a child that is repeating and you're not really sure what it is, make the referral to the SLP for a quick assessment. Runs in families. And we're all disfluent upon occasion. You've heard me when I've been giving these lectures. I stutter and stumble through whatever it is that I want to say. The disorder for fluency is characterized by a hesitation. One of my husband's closest friends is a stutterer, and I've never had a conversation with him about it. But he'll go, er, and you don't know if he's going to go on. Now I know. I'm used to that. I'm used to his behavior and his pattern. But yeah, he'll pause, and it's like there's silence, and it's like the tongue is stuck on the roof of the mouth, and then he'll release it. So that's the hesitation. The repetition, he might say, well, did he call? He's repeating. And there isn't a lot of tension or a lot of pressure or stress. There is some, well, did he call? Just a little, well, did he call? Just a little. Prolongation, well, vol. We prolong the sound to help us get through it. We don't want to see the stress. We don't want to see some of these secondary characteristics of where they could actually, we call it a block, where they get blocked and they can't move forward. But we do know that there is some neurological basis to that, and it is not uncommon when I do an intake to have the parents say, yes, I was a stutterer too. When it begins, it's very easy. It's very simple. The child is just working. Well, what do you mean? Just nice, easy speech, even though there are repetitions. And it can be very episodic between 2 and 6 years, meaning the parent makes a referral to me. I talk to him on the phone. Oh my gosh, my 3-year-old, he's stuttering all the time, and it's awful. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say to him. So we schedule an appointment for an assessment. The secretary calls and to get them in, and the parent says, well, it stopped. I don't think we need to come in. It goes away. And then we don't schedule the appointment, and they call me a month later and say, ooh, it's back. So it is episodic. It comes and it goes. And that's okay. That's okay. As long as it's nice and easy. The child doesn't recognize it. The child doesn't fear speaking, and we don't see tension. One thing that you don't want to do when a child is going through these episodes of fluency, you don't want to ask them to try and talk if they're crying. I don't know. You can't speak if you're crying. You can't. And so you don't want to put that pressure on them. If they've just learned the ABCs. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Grandparents come over. Come on, Johnny, do your ABCs for Grandma and Grandpa. You don't want to put them in front of people and ask them to perform. If they're tired, if they're sick, don't pressure for speech, especially during those times where that stuttering is episodic. You don't want to put them on the spot. It's too stressful. There is another disorder besides stuttering. It's called cluttering, and it's within that same speech type of range. But clutterers usually fall into also having language problems, and they sort of rush their speech and then they stop. Well, I don't know. It's sort of this stop and rush and start and stop, and that's cluttering. And it could coexist with the stuttering, but it's this rapid rate of speech, lots of disfluencies as a result of that. The tone could be monotone. It's sort of a mumbling type of speech, because what it's doing is interrupting that person's ability to get their message across. And it's disruptive. Remember, Van Riper talked about it's a true speech disorder if it's conspicuous, if it interferes with um, their ability to get a message across, if it's unintelligible, or if they think they have a problem. Well, you would begin to think, what's the problem here? And it is an issue, and we do see that in speech. That would be part of our caseload. Um, let's see. Stuttering is not usually caused from a traumatic brain injury. We don't see that. If, although I did see it once, but I think that the woman had a cerebrovascular accident, a CVA, and she came in, and every word that she said, there was this repetition. That was more of a psychological component. I'm not sure that we ever discovered where the basis was for that, but typically you don't see that from CVAs or strokes. Now, they may have word finding problems, but that's different. Um, let's see. That would be more as I look at psychogenic types of stuttering. So that finishes up the speech disorders. I've given you a quick rundown of dyslexia. I certainly don't want you getting out into the public school and not having some background on dyslexia. And some of you may want to do the Orton Gillingham training. Again, final exam opens Tuesday, 12:15. Whoops, let me get it in line. At 8 a.m. Closes 12:17 at 11:59. It is an open book exam. You can use your notes, the text, PowerPoint, or whatever. Now, you will only have a certain amount of time. I mean, that I will put time in there, and you will have more time. Typically, you've had 90 minutes. You're going to have more time in order to take that final, because if you're looking up information, please listen to every single recording that I've done. There aren't that many. Listen to them twice. Take notes. Listen to what I'm saying. Listen and follow through, and you should be fine. Okay? So the next time you hear from me, I will be doing a review for the final. And let's see, this lecture has been about 45 minutes. Still early in the morning. It's only 7:30. But I have a lot of things I need to get done before other supervisors come in and need things. So I like these early morning, peaceful, quiet, solo times. So if you need me, you know where I am, and I will see you one more time for a lecture, the overview for the exam. Okay? All right. Have a good day. Be safe. Be kind to each other. Tell people that are important to you that you love them. Would you? Had a friend tell me last night, sent me a text, and her father passed in the ICU from COVID at 7:36 last night. Call mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, tell them you love them. Bye.